reverse. No, that's not reverse.
Starting out strong.
We're back with Roto Hackers. We are the unauthorized source of entertainment and news, something like that. Information and news.
Fantasy football news and information.
So
After 2 seasons and now a third, we still haven't gotten it right.
All right, so who you just heard was my old partner, AJ Herschel, the kid. And we're also joined by our new partner, it's Jared.
I like it.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah. And we are here to talk about the news and look at who is the player that you will never draft, the player that you have on none of your rosters, the player that you scoff at. But first, let's get to the news. The big news, of course, that happened recently, not too recently now. I mean, in football years, this is like old, but Lamar Miller I'm just kidding. Okay. So Luck is out of the league. He retired. And it just so happens we have a huge Colts enthusiast. A big enthusiast in our podcast here. So Jared, tell us, are you grieving?
No, but I'm not really grieving. I'm a mercenary, as we've discussed in other podcasts before. So I've already kind of like how Jerry Jones was joking, in regards to like Tony Pollard having some good preseason games at running back, and somebody mentioned Zeke, and he's like, Zeke who? And so I'm already like, Andrew who? Did he?
The pain.
You're cold.
Didn't he used to play quarterback for the Colts? I don't know. He's not their quarterback now. So and then it's kind of like turns into the Belichick thing where it's like we're on to Cincinnati. So we're on to Jacoby.
I think he's in denial.
No, I'm not in denial. It's just like I don't know. I was kind of
you're a little bitter though.
I'm a little bit bitter about it. Not if he had done it a month earlier, I would have been disappointed, but completely understood.
So what's up with that? How come he waited to the last minute to do it? Did he you think he thought, all right, I'll gut through it, I'll do this, and then at the last minute it was just like I don't have it in me, or what?
I honestly don't think we know the real story with all of that, and I don't know that we ever will. Andrew Luck has just had these mystery pains and mystery injuries for like 3 years now, and he everybody knows that he took a legitimate beating for a long time in his career. I mean, he had a torn rib cartilage and like a lacerated kidney and a torn shoulder labrum. So he's legitimately gotten beaten up. But when he had shoulder surgery prior to the 2017, like he had shoulder surgery in like January of 2017, supposed to be ready in plenty of time for the season. And then the pain, he said, just never went away. He couldn't throw without pain. They never really said what that was, why it lingered so long. He went to the Netherlands for several months. They never said what kind of treatment he got, And so then this season, so he came back last year, played great last year. The Colts went 10-6, went to the second round of the playoffs. He played in the Pro Bowl. Everything seemed fine. And then in March or April, he told the team he had like a calf issue. And then it just kept going on and on. And then they said, and then it had supposedly like moved to like his ankle or like the front part of his ankle or something. And so then they had this story about how it was like this little bone there. And then they're like, no, we ruled that out too. So it's weird. I don't know, I hate to not take him at his word, but when he's talking about like the Colts owner, Jim Irsay, always used to say that a lot of Andrew's issues were on the 4-inch field between his ears, basically saying it's in his head. And at the time, like people kind of bristled, me included, because it's like, well, we know he's taken a legitimate beating. it sounds like you're just trying to deflect from the fact that you didn't do a good job of putting an offensive line around him. And Jim Irsay, he's had all these substance abuse problems and all this. And so we just thought like, okay, Jim's had a little too much like booze and he's just, spouting off. Now, after all this, it's kind of like, all right, maybe there was something to that, And so I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know the real story on it, but I am a little bit bitter at the timing of it. Like I said, other players like Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson, Jim Brown, these guys have all, retired in the offseason. They haven't waited until week 3 of the preseason and then just been like, nah, I don't want to rehab anymore. I'm out. So, a little bit bitter.
I'm just looking at my draft. These beepity beeps gave me luck as my last pick.
Are you serious?
I left early and I said, "Who'd you guys get me?" They got me last. What about you, AJ? What are your thoughts?
I have had luck for probably at least 3 different fantasy years. So as a fantasy owner, it's kind of painful simply because he had always, when healthy, had been eerily consistent. It was incredible. Like if he had been healthy every single year, we'd be saying he'd probably be, if not one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, undisputedly. So it's just kind of hard just having him off the board. And I do get leaving. I do get that he's had a bunch of injury problems. And I keep thinking that, leaving in week 3 of the preseason was bad. But when I think about what happened last year when Vontae Davis just went peace out at halftime in week 17, I'm like, it could have been, he could have left at a worse time than with a week and a half to go in the preseason, and the Colts can still do something before the season starts. So more, it's just like, I'm just going to miss him.
Yeah. Well, how long do you think the organization actually had? Like, how long do you think they've known that he's going to retire?
We'll
never know.
We'll never know. They claim only like a week or so. And I'm kind of inclined to believe that if it's been longer than that, it probably hasn't been that much longer. So I think it probably hasn't been that long because otherwise, man, they just straight up lied to people because they were very sincerely saying like, he's going to be ready. We think he's going to be ready. And so, I mean, they could have known, like, I think the earliest that they would have really known would have been like, in the preseason, but I think it probably had to be, I don't think there was a big conspiracy about it or anything, a long-term conspiracy about it or anything. Because that just wouldn't, I don't know. It just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, but.
Well, we'll see. I think it's interesting that the Colts went and they're looking at Icewater, and they're looking at it. I mean, they got to get a backup for Kobe Brissett.
Well, they've got Chad Kelly.
They do? That's right.
They've got Chad Kelly. Chad Kelly has been really good in the preseason. However, Chad Kelly, you are just playing with fire having him on your roster.
He's had some off the field problems. To
put it mildly, Yeah. So I mean, it's just been, just if you kind of listen to the guy, I just don't think he's got a lot upstairs. I don't know that he's ever going to have it together. So I mean, my hope is, like, some fans don't want to see a losing season. They would rather the Colts go 8-8 or 9-7 forever than just have one bad season and get another quarterback. I'm like, you can lose every game this year, and I'm fine with that. Like,
but I think Brissett's going to be fine. I've always thought that Brissett's a good player. Like, I think he's up there. I think he's up there with Winston and some of these, maybe not Dak level, but close.
I don't think so. I mean, he'll be better than what he didn't have anything to work with in 2017 when he started. So he'll be better, but he holds the ball too long and he's not that accurate. And so he's got a big arm. He's a great leader. Everybody likes him, but man, he holds the ball, and man, does he have some accuracy issues.
But that's something. Those are two things that you can fix. He's got a great throw. Like his throwing mechanics and all his mechanics are solid.
Yeah, but two things you can't fix is the division he's in. I mean, his division is much harder than it was 2 years ago as well. Houston's gotten better. Jacksonville's defense is much better.
Wait. Houston's gotten better.
Houston as a team, as a whole team, not their
I'm
defense.
talking about their defense.
Not their defense. Not necessarily their defense.
Their
But Houston
defense
as a
has
team.
gotten worse.
But I don't see Jacoby Brissett winning a firefight against Deshaun Watson. I don't see that happening.
I mean, really, I think you can just break it down and looking like the Colts were 10-6 last year with luck. Their team, they've got a young team, so it got a little bit better just by maturity and by adding some pieces. So the team overall is better than it was last year. However, what does losing Luck cost you? What is the downgrade from Luck to Jacoby? And I would say it's a handful of wins. I think that's a three win difference, maybe 2 or 3 win difference. Maybe you add one for the improved team, but you probably take away 3 for Luck, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Then,
you're much more of a Luck fan than I was. I've never thought he was that great. I mean, he had great athleticism, but he had his problems too. He was put up like way up here when his production was like, eh.
I mean, if you just look at his numbers, like his numbers, I mean, he was second only to Mahomes in touchdowns last year, and they had very little last year. I mean, they had T.Y. Hilton, and they basically turned Eric Ebron into a star tight end. He did nothing
But see,
Detroit.
if you just look at his numbers, you're missing how much he threw. Like he threw way more than everybody in the league.
Yeah, he had to because they had no offensive line and no defense. And
when you throw that much, of course you're going to have high numbers. He also had a lot of interceptions, a lot.
He did early on, but I mean, last year when you look at optimal circumstances, because every other year he had to throw a lot because their defense was terrible and he had no offensive line. But last year, I mean, his numbers were second only to Mahomes, and they didn't have, again, great receivers. But the other thing to consider for next year is, because they went 10-6 last year, in 2017, they got a softer schedule last year because they were so bad in 2017. Well, they were good last year. So this year they play the Steelers on the road. They play the Saints on the road. They open with the Chargers on the road. They have to play the NFC South. So they get Atlanta, Carolina. I don't know if I remember. I think I did mention playing in New Orleans. They play a couple of other teams at home that are pretty solid. And then, the division, usually the division games in almost any division, unless you're the Patriots, sometimes even then, because the Patriots lose to the Dolphins somehow, but
the Bills.
Yeah. And so division games are always tough. And so the Texans played them really tight last year. The Jaguars played them really tight. Sure. The Titans, usually the Colts can handle the Titans, but you're maybe looking at splitting those division games. So you get 3 losses there. You're looking at probably 4 tough road losses. And then if you lose a couple others, I mean, you're 7-9 pretty quick.
Yeah.
Could be. It could be. I just think they're going to be really competitive in their division.
I think, I mean, I can see that, but
they've got the worst division in the league.
No,
I wouldn't go that.
Look at what the Patriots what the Patriots have had to go up against: the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Jets forever.
But this year the Dolphins, not the Dolphins.
No, not
the Jets.
Dolphins.
The Jets and the Bills are going to be way better than the the Titans, and who else are they playing?
The Colts, you mean? Like,
who are the Colts?
The Jaguars. Who, the Jaguars now got Foles as their quarterback.
Yeah, but their defense is terrible now. Like, not terrible, but not half as good as last year.
Off year.
They did.
It's one off year.
Yeah,
they're going to have another one. Newsflash: they're going to have another off year because their talent, though it's good, they don't play as a team. They're already talking about Clowney. Clowney is somebody else.
That's the Texans.
I was thinking of the Texans.
Yeah.
But the same thing with the whole division. I don't see like anybody who seems formidable defensive wise.
Yeah. Well, actually, the Colts
have a really good defense.
Really good defense.
Here.
Yeah, it's funny. Like now the only thing they're missing is a franchise quarterback. If only there was one of those guys around that would play for. And the other thing with Andrew Luck, and then we probably need to get back to fantasy, but Alex Trebek at 79 just finished up his pancreatic chemo treatments and is going back to work at 79. Andrew Luck.
But granted,
So I'm sorry about
Alex Trebek is not. Alex Trebek's not getting hit by 300-pound man daily. So like,
but he's
getting hit with $2,000 questions daily.
and Alex would go out and take those hits, I think, and pop back up, and he wouldn't quit in week 3 of the preseason.
Could be. Okay, so does anybody have any? We lost the kid. AJ, you there?
He froze for a second. There he is.
I'm back.
And he's back. All right. So does anybody have any first words? Going back to the first word, last word. While you guys are thinking, I just got done with a draft, and it was a pretty important draft. It was only 10 teams, which can be kind of a bummer because it's like a little too easy. But I guess what I've been doing lately, my last 2 or 3 drafts, what I've been doing lately is going 4 running backs in a row. If I have anything close to the end of the draft, I get 4 running backs right off the bat, or I get 3 in Juju. And I'm loving my teams. Like I'm loving, because I'm amazed at how many good wide receivers after I get those 4 like solid running backs. There's so many good wide receivers, like guys that I'm willing to easily trust. Like you got like Williams, Curtis Samuel, a lot of these guys. I'm like, they're gonna do fine. Godwin, I'm fine with these guys. Yeah, now you got TY, fine with him.
I heartily disagree. So much. We've talked about.
I'm glad because I'm drafting for tomorrow.
We've talked about multiple times this year how often running backs get injured and how often.
That's why you need more.
Waiver wire.
That's why you need more
running backs right at the beginning. It's a lot. If you get a solid wide receiver, and a solid running back early, and say your running back gets injured, you can pick another one off. It's somewhat easier to replace a running back than it is to replace a top wide receiver.
True, but it's somewhat of a myth that wide receivers don't go down, because they often do, and they often did last year. Like with Beckham going down, you had even Tyreek going down for several games. You had a lot of injuries.
Like quick questionable injuries that came and went for a week or two. They weren't super major. Like I had Odell. He was probably out for 2 games last year, 4 games max, and he still performed really well last year.
No, he didn't.
He did. He did.
Odell performed decent at the end of the year, but he lost a lot of people their leagues.
So I partially agree with your strategy. I would not take that many. Like my ideal team, if I could draft the way I wanted to draft this year, but of course it doesn't work out that way. But I would get a wide receiver and preferably even a tight end if I could, along with a running back in the first 3 rounds, and then take running backs in 4 and 5. Yep. Because wide receivers, I feel like the first 2 rounds, wide receivers are great. Or maybe you can even get Mike Evans like at the top of the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. But then after that, like rounds 4 and 5, and maybe even 6, there's hardly anybody I want at wide receiver. Godwin now is kind of like pulled up into the 6th round, so maybe him. But then like from 7, 8 or so in there, a lot of guys that I think are good values, like Tyler Lockett.
See, yeah, that's one I've been, yeah.
Yeah, Tyler Lockett, Tyler Boyd, Robbie Anderson, Cooper Kupp, Dede Westbrook. So whereas with running backs, there's like hardly anybody after round 5 that I really want to take until towards the end of the draft, and they're like, handcuff guys. Yeah, so, but I think you need to take, I'd like having like a flagpole player at each position if I can. And so I feel like if you get 1 star receiver and 1 star running back, you can find, you'll have some guys that break out that you can kind of put around them and maybe turn into stars themselves. But I hate being so stocked at one position where maybe I find a good running back on the waiver wire, but I have nowhere to play him because I've taken all those guys. And then I've got receivers who maybe they didn't pan out like I thought they would after all. And there's no star guy to kind of anchor that.
I hear you, but look, so I got Josh Gordon, Mike Williams, Allen Robinson, Emmanuel Sanders, John Brown. All these guys are going to have high production. This is a half-point PPR. I think it's going to be. I'm fine taking any of those as my second wide receiver. You know, I have a couple second wide receivers, two wide receivers too. I think it's going to do great for me.
I don't trust that. None of the guys you mentioned, I don't trust them. The
you don't have to trust them. They're going to get tons of catches.
But I'm not trust. That's entirely my point. I don't trust them because I don't trust that they're going to get tons of catches. Josh Gordon, we know Josh Gordon's history. Well, I always want to call him San Diego, LA. Man, there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. You know, like
LA,
the Chargers.
Oh, Chargers. Oh yeah.
Mike Williams. Yeah. So there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. Running backs, Hunter Henry, last year, Mike Williams didn't put up that many yards. Now his yards and receptions should go up, but his touchdowns are probably going to go down because they've got Hunter Henry back, and Hunter Henry's another big body in the end zone.
I disagree. I think I think their red zone target's going to be Mike Williams. We'll see. Who knows? Might be Hunter Henry, but Hunter Henry's more of a dump off guy, route runner, close. He's going to be like a slot player.
Maybe. I'm not totally against your strategy, but I have a very different view of which guys I would be taking in the rounds or so that you're talking about, or for the dollar values that you're talking about.
What about any other intro? Like, what is it? What do we call it? First words.
I can go ahead and throw one out there. It's not exactly a take back of what I said last time, but due to certain events, my opinion has slightly changed. And last time I was super against taking Tevin Coleman because I just saw giant red lights blinking committee in my face all day. And then Jerick McKinnon went down again. And now he's in a one-on-one competition with Matt Breida that I feel like he's going to win. I feel like he's going to come out on top in that competition. So I feel more comfortable taking him in later rounds than I had before because I thought he was going too high. But now with McKinnon going down, I'm more comfortable taking him around where he's going.
That's funny. I'm higher. I used to be higher on Coleman, but since I just think Breida is skyrocketing right now, and I think he's going to take over the job. I think Coleman's going to be the clear backup. He's just not as good. He's not a good player.
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like Breida's the better value right now because you can get him so much later.
Get him almost last pick.
Get him almost last. Well, probably not now.
Not now.
Probably not now. But before you could have, or off the waiver wire in some leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But man, Tevin Coleman. Having watched him last year, living in Georgia and seeing so many Falcons games, like there was a time like with him and Devonta Freeman where there was, in earlier seasons where it's like, who's really the better running back? And then he had his chance last year and he had a couple of big games, but he really just couldn't put it together. So my confidence in him is still pretty low.
He reminds me of like a weak David Johnson.
That is kind of a little bit. I mean, but he's just more of a, he's more of a straight line guy. He's more of he doesn't have the shiftiness. He doesn't have the power. It's just like, if you can get him in a straight line going, but like, how many opportunities does a running back have like that?
Do you have any first words, Mr. J-Rod?
No, I think the luck thing kind of covered most of my first words. Oh, I will say I am really happy that I didn't have I didn't have T.Y. Hilton in any leagues
Ooh.
because and I was glad that I did that before Luck went down, but I'm especially glad now. But I always feel like my first words will be that I feel like T.Y. Hilton is overrated as a fantasy player because he has for several reasons, but the main thing is like he has such a limited touchdown ceiling. You know, he's such a short guy that his touchdowns have to come outside the red zone generally.
He's boomer bust.
He's boomer bust. He can put up some 170-yard games.
Yeah, he just booms a lot. He's boomer bust, but he booms a lot.
Yeah, he does. And so he doesn't, you know, the ceiling, I don't like to draft a guy knowing that his touchdown ceiling is like 6 touchdowns, you know, under best scenario. And he really doesn't get that many receptions either. You know, like, I mean, he's more of like a, 75 reception guy, but he's such a big play threat that he picks up, big chunks of yards on those. So that was a 3rd round guy. And, I've got more than a dozen teams. I've still got a couple waiting to draft, but I've got like 13 right now. Took TY in none of them. So I did have Luck in a couple as a, like a 7th round pick or something like that. But I didn't get burned by the Colts situation that much because I had avoided TY.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about who do you have 0 of. I guess you've started us off with a glimpse. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that Lamar Miller has been taken out probably for the season with an ACL, and Duke Johnson is looking pretty. I went and picked him when it happened. I went and picked him up everywhere. Nobody seemed to like beat me to the punch, and seems like when everybody like 2 days later were like, "Where's Duke Johnson?"
Yeah.
And even me, I went and I was like, "Oh, what if anybody took Duke Johnson?" Oh yeah, I did. I was like, huh, that's a good idea. Because I think when it first, actually, I think I took it when he got traded, not when the thing happened. I think I took him because I've always liked Duke Johnson's skill at catching the passes, and thought that he was going to be a great like 3rd down back or a great like scat back. Now I don't know. We'll see. Projections have him higher than I think he really is going to be. Like people are projecting him to get like all kinds of catches and all kinds of carries, but they're going to bring somebody in, probably like a Carlos Hyde or somebody.
Yeah, he was only available in one of my leagues. I picked him up in that one league. I don't know what you're going to get out of him. I loved getting him for free off the waiver wire, but most people had hung on to him after that trade. So he wasn't really available. Yeah, I don't know. Like I did an auction draft. I think I've only done one draft. I've done 2. I don't remember where he went in the snake draft, but in the auction draft, he went for like $20, which is the same as like about the same. He went for like maybe $1 or $2 less than like Chris Carson and Devonta Freeman. And I don't feel comfortable taking him at that regardless, but especially when we don't know if they're going to bring in anybody else or not, if he's really going to be a 3-down back. So if you can get him cheap, but it's still like too shaky of a situation for me to spend much on him.
Yeah. And then I did want to mention real quick, I didn't want to just kind of blow over this, but Kareem Hunt underwent sports hernia surgery, and that typically will put you out for a little while. That's hernia is not, I mean, it's not going to take him out longer than his week 10, coming back to week 10, but it's 4 to 6 weeks. And that's time he's not going to, I was talking to Jared before we got on. That's time he's not going to be working out. That's time he's not going to be practicing, because he wasn't able to practice with the team anyways. But he's going to be really rusty when he gets back. And so it's making my Nick Chubb picks everywhere looking real sweet right now. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it helps.
Makes sense.
So AJ, we'll go with you first. Who is somebody when you draft, it's like a blind spot, not because I missed him, but because like, some people like, I'll go through a list and just cross I'll cross people off even though they haven't been taken because I'm like, I'm not going to take them. Who's that person for you usually?
Typically it's a guy for the New York Giants, wide receiver. Sat behind Odell for a while.
There we go.
His name was Sterling something. Sterling
Silver.
Shepard. That's
Oh,
what it
goodness.
was. Yes.
He's a shepherd.
You were always really high on him, Judah Boone. I was
Still am.
never that high on him.
Still am.
He's going like round 11 or 12. And at that point, I'd pretty much rather take like a handcuff running back or a different wide receiver on a team that has a bona fide prolific passing offense that's actually going to be good, guaranteed pretty much. So, yeah, not feeling super confident about Sterling Shepard this year.
A lot of hate for the shepherd, huh?
Yeah, not so much hate. Just I've said before that one of the things I trust the most is consistency. And Sterling Shepard has never performed consistently in fantasy with consistent good stat line. He'd have like 1 week out of 4 where he'd get over 10 points, and then that would be it. And Odell would get all the catches the rest of the season.
Wait, somebody's not there anymore, though. Who's not on the team to catch those passes anymore? Oh, Odell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's still not happening for Shepard. He's not. I don't feel he's a number one wide receiver. I don't see it happening.
A number one or a number one on his team?
On his team, yeah. I
think he'll do fine.
Not fine enough for me to pick him up.
Okay, that's perfectly. I get that. In fact, I have very little shares of him because of where he's going. I just by that time I forget about him, or by that time I'm trying to pick up some tight ends or quarterbacks. What about you, J-Row?
Kind of what I was saying earlier about the receiver values of where I either want to take a guy in the first 2 rounds or maybe Mike Evans at the top of the 3rd, or after that, I basically avoid him until like the 6th round or so. So I was thinking about it. I have 0 shares out of like 13 teams. I have 0 shares of T.Y. Hilton. I have 0 shares of Antonio Brown. I have 0 shares of Stephon Diggs. I have 0 shares of Adam Thielen. Trying to think, there's probably another, guy or so in there, but just all those guys like Minnesota shifting to more of a, supposed to be shifting to more of a running game this year. Adam Thielen was a maniac for like 2/3 of the season or 3/4 of the season last year, and then did nothing down the stretch. Stephon Diggs is almost kind of like T.Y. Hilton. He's really really boom or bust. He had a lot of like 35-yard games and would have some bigger games. I probably like him the best out of those because you can still get like some decent value on him. Antonio Brown, like that is a volatile situation. He's talented, but man, I think we've seen all the stuff that's happened in the preseason, and imagine that we get part of the way into the season and he's not putting up great numbers, and people are starting to ask the questions like, did Ben Roethlisberger just make you good? We've already had meltdowns over like helmets and feet and everything else, and like Derek Carr is not a terribly accurate quarterback, and so like part of the reason that Antonio Brown wanted to go play with him was because he loved the ball that that Derek Carr threw to him in the Pro Bowl. Like, dude, they don't play defense in the Pro Bowl. They're going to be playing defense on you in real games. You're going to have pass rushers going after Derek Carr and making him put that ball out quicker. So, so Antonio Brown, like, I don't know. He's just one of those guys. Like, I would be willing to take him, like, probably very into the 3rd or maybe top of the 4th, maybe. If I had already gotten a couple of running backs, like the situation would have to be pretty specific for me to take him. And it just hasn't panned out that way. There's always been a running back or a tight end or something that I would rather take there. So, for me, it's really those receivers like that, along with, Hilton that I mentioned earlier. Of course, now he's going, my last snake draft, he went like the bottom of the 5th round. So, so he's really fallen, and he's more to a point where I'd be willing to, take a chance on him at that point. But yeah, I just don't feel like that's a great value spot for receivers. I feel like you can get some running backs, in that area like Fournette or Jacobs or Michelle or Montgomery that could really, end up being a top 10 running back for the season. Whereas these receivers, I don't think any of them are going to push for, top 10 status.
Antonio Brown did get hit with the Madden curse. Let's keep that in mind.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What?
The Madden curse, Antonio Brown. That's why he's messed up. Got frostbite in his feet. The people that made the game engine for Madden 19 was a company called Frostbite.
I saw that. That's
There you
crazy.
go.
That was crazy.
Wait, what happened with that then?
The company that makes the game engine for Madden 19 is a company
Oh, it's
called Frostbite.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's
well,
on
What
the
happened,
cover.
Antonio?
who's on the cover this year, you know?
Madden 20, Pat Mahomes.
Little Mahomes action. So do you think he's going to have a big letdown this year?
I don't know. We'll see how magical he is. He's going to have a lot of because I don't think he would have a letdown year, but a lot of times with the Madden curse, it's some kind of injury. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Gronk, really
Mhm.
great example. 2017, just gone.
I think the year Brady was on it was the year that he got tackled low and tore his ACL. I
Madden
think
18.
I remember that right. So yeah.
Well, in spite of all that, I was somebody who had Mahomes in a lot of teams last year. I mean, a lot. I only had 6 teams, and I think I had like 3 out of 6. This year, I've taken him nowhere. Of course, that's not that big of a deal. So because a lot of people aren't getting, because he's going in the first round.
Yeah.
So I was going to focus more on somebody who I have not taken at all. I only took him one place, and it was for somebody else's team because I had a draft for them. Was
What?
Mike Evans.
No, I like Evans.
Mm,
I've just never liked Mike Evans. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. I think there was some confirmation bias for me last year at the beginning of the year where he was getting a lot of targets, but he's dropping a lot of balls. And I think he's a big, talented player, but for some reason, I just don't. I have a bad feeling about him, and I just haven't taken him. I just haven't taken him anywhere. And I'm also high on Godwin, so it's like when I'm taking all these RBs at the beginning, I'm just thinking about Godwin later. And why would I take Evans if I want to take Godwin too? I don't want to have both of them. You know?
True.
So I haven't taken him. And then another one. What's funny is I was really high on Joe Mixon last year. I love Joe Mixon. I actually still really like him. But when it gets down to it, and I have to pick between Joe Mixon and Fournette and Julio Jones, maybe even like Devontae or Tyreek Hill. Even today, I had to pick between him and James Conner. I picked James Conner.
Yeah.
I believe that Mixon is a more talented player. I'm just really worried about his team.
Yeah.
When it comes but here's the thing though, I'm really worried about Pittsburgh too. So I don't really know. I guess this is just the quarterback is not as worrisome. But I think Pittsburgh's going to have a real tough time this year. They are not going to be the same team they've been. They're going to have a really good defense, but I think they can lean on their running back, and they've still got a really good offensive line.
Yeah.
Whereas the Bengals do not have a good offensive line. It might get
Don't really
better.
have much of anything in general.
Not
Not much.
They got
Not
some
much.
pieces. They're going to be a decent.
AJ Green constantly injured. John Ross III injured himself
injured.
twice last year. Their
And
defense
injured
is not
now.
what it used to be. Andy Dalton, I've heard multiple times that he's the definition of mediocrity in a quarterback.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot.
And their line is not great
I think
either.
that's the thing that scares me the most.
Yeah.
Is their line.
I think I have 1, maybe 2 shares of Mixon. And I feel much better about Pittsburgh. I feel fine about Pittsburgh unless Roethlisberger gets hurt or something, which is always a risk. But Pittsburgh, I feel fine about because he and that offense are so good at home. Even if they're just good at home, that's going to be 8 strong, productive games. The other thing is, we already saw him lose Le'Veon Bell last year. We know James Conner can, if he stays healthy, he can carry the load on that. And yeah, they lost Antonio Brown, but you got to think back, like, this is an offense that's always been, pretty strong, and they've really rotated some different receivers through there. They
That's
used
true.
to have Plaxico Burress, and then they had Emmanuel Sanders and
Mike Wallace,
and
Holmes.
yes, Antonio Holmes. Yeah, like I've forgotten all the guys that they had there, and so I think they can still. It will be different. It won't be as much of a big play thing.
Yeah.
But I think they'll still. I think Washington could emerge. Moncrief is solid.
You're making me thirstier for Moncrief.
Yeah. So I think Pittsburgh will be fine. Cincinnati.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to pick up a lot. I have Boyd in a fair number of leagues because I took him early in the year cheaper, and then now more of a 6th, 7th round guy. But
yeah, I took Michael Williams. I had to choose between Michael Williams and him. Or was it Michael Williams? Or yes, I think it was Michael Williams, and I took Michael Williams. I just think Michael Williams is going to have a fantastic year. He came out of college, everybody raving about him. Man, look, have you ever seen him play? He's a beast, man.
I saw him in the national championship game against Alabama, and he was a beast. He was, yeah. I don't know. Just a lot of mouths. I don't know. A lot of mouths to feed in San Diego. It scares me a little bit. If Keenan goes down, then Williams could really. But I think apart from that, Keenan is just.
Who are all these mouths? Let's break this down.
Yeah.
It's Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry.
Yeah, but Keenan, have you seen his target total for the year? I mean, Keenan gets tons of targets by himself. Then you're adding in Henry. Then you're adding in the fact that they are one of the teams that loves to throw to their running backs so much. So Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon both. I mean, even if Gordon's not there, but especially when both of them are, they like to throw to the running back a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, you know what this is making me think? I need to
don't forget the other Williams. Tyrell Williams is still there too.
No, Tyrell's not in there anymore.
Tyrell went to the Raiders. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is making me think about Rivers. You can get off the waiver wire in a lot of leagues.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Rivers. I might start picking him up.
Yeah, he's almost like Jameis Winston though. He can. I mean, not in the sense that he's gonna have a meltdown and get benched, but he'll have some games where you're like, man, you ought to just carve up this defense, and it's 1 touchdown, 3 INTs, and 20 yards. So
I've been burnt by him before. I think that's why I haven't taken. I've had negative 3-point games from him.
Yeah, I just can't. The older he gets, he's got so much talent around him, but man, he just. If I had to depend on him for a game in the middle of the season or something, but it's hard to just roll with him.
It's true. He's the definition of boomer bust, really. He's the most boomer bust quarterback I think there is.
I'd say Winston. Say Winston because Winston can literally give you 0 touchdowns and 5 INTs. That's a legitimate stat line.
I don't think he's ever given that.
Oh yeah.
I think we could go back to just. I'm gonna have to while we're doing that. I'll look it up.
Look it up. See if he's because I know I've gotten that from Rivers. I've never got and I've had both him and Winston quite a bit.
Yeah, and
I've always been pretty satisfied with Winston, but Rivers, man, I've had negative 3 points. Negative. It was on Thanksgiving Day. He gave me. It was 2 years ago. He gave me negative 3 points.
Who were they playing on that day, though?
I can't remember. I think they were playing. I can't remember.
Was that Kansas City? I feel like I watched that game.
It might have been Kansas City.
Yeah, I've been.
All right. So, what about you, AJ? Do you have any final words for us as we bid our adieu?
Come back to me. I'm still collecting my thoughts on this.
Okay. Well, I'll say for my final thoughts, what do you guys think? I think it's going to be an interesting year. I think that we're going to see a lot of teams who we expect to be bad be good, or not good, but not as bad as we thought. And we're going to see a lot of teams we expected to be good, bad. There's a famous quote by Sigmund Bloom, fantasy, analyst, verbose in his own way, who said predicting fantasy can be interesting because your predictions can be right and wrong in the same season because the NFL is so unpredictable and changes so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going back to Jameis. Yeah, Jameis had 2 games back to back last year. One where he had 0 touchdowns and 3 turnovers, and then one in Cincinnati.
But how many yards did he have?
I already closed that one out. But the second one I was looking at was the game I was thinking of last year, where it wasn't quite 0-5. It was 1-4. He had 276 yards. 1 touchdown, 4 INTs in Cincinnati. It was just brutal.
But see, that's not -3.
Well, that does. You got to remember what kind of league you're in, though, because if you're in a 4-point touchdown league, that's really bad. If you're in a 6-point touchdown league, it's not as bad, but it still hurts.
Right.
I mean, that's still you're still 6 points.
Yeah, but I mean, you got to think about, nowadays, like quarterbacks are just putting up. I mean, last year was just like a record number for, passing yards. So like used to 6 points. I mean, 6 points is not great. It's bad regardless, but where you now just have like more and more like video game numbers where you need your guy to put up. Like if your guy puts up 15 at the quarterback spot, like that's in a 4-point touchdown league. That's tough. Like you really need.
Yes, I agree. And by the way, I went back and looked, and what's his name? Watson. He had 3 good, decent games, but they were only it was 23, 26, and then he had a big game. Those ones that you were pointing out, like fantasy points, they didn't translate to huge games. It's last year. 23 points, 26 points wasn't whoa.
That's solid. That's a good starter.
It was pretty good. I mean, he finished top 5.
Top 5. We read the stats last episode.
He was on the waiver wire in most leagues.
That's insane.
That's horrible.
That is insane.
Who are you playing?
What are you talking about? It was your league. Our league we're in. He was on the waiver wire.
He was gone. He was taken. He was
taken. He was on the waiver wire.
Yeah, he was. Yes, he was.
Anyways, in an 8-team league, he was not taken. I'm sure he was on the waiver wire. Well, any final thoughts?
Well, we talked a little bit about it before we got started. I get a little bit more concerned about the Zeke holdout. Well, probably a lot more concerned about the Zeke holdout as it goes on. I've got him in 2 leagues, 2 of my 13. What's funny to me this year is going in some of the guys that I thought I was really going to be taking a lot of, I just have very few shares of. Like coming in, I would have been taking a lot of Melvin Gordon if he hadn't been holding out, and I would have been taking a lot of Ezekiel Elliott. And now I have Gordon in 1 league, 1 out of 13, and fortunately I have Eckler with him, and then I have Zeke in 2 leagues, and I have Tony Pollard with him in 1 league, but then I don't have him with him in the other one. So now it's starting to look like he may hold out, a few games. Maybe that could turn into 6 games. So I'm a little more worried about him, but I haven't ended up really taking him that much. And I was fortunate because my early drafts, I just didn't get top 5 picks. And so, or at least top 4 picks, I seem to always be 5 or 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was frustrated at the time, but then it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because if I'd have been 2 or 3, I would have probably been taking Zeke. So I'm glad I didn't. But yeah, it was just interesting because I was thinking oh, these guys are going to have big years. And then I've just completely, had to shy away from them. Like a lot of people have. So
I'm surprised he's still going in the first round.
Yeah.
Well, just for the longest time, the narrative was they're so close that something's going to get done. All the analysts were saying something's going to get done, and maybe it still does. But I think that's just I think that's just kind of been the thing. I think with Melvin Gordon, we knew like early on, it started looking like, man, the Chargers have kind of done this before with some different players, Vincent Jackson and guys like that. We've seen this with them. So I started immediately avoiding Melvin Gordon. But with Zeke, I just thought like, they got to be close. They'll probably get something done. And I think maybe it would have happened if Tony Pollard hadn't had such a good preseason, but I think kind of that Jerry Jones is going like, oh, I drafted another good running back, maybe we'll just let this play out and show, because it does get into this like, ego thing where, Zeke wants them to fail. And really Zeke's got incentive to see how they do in real games. And like, if they don't do well, because as someone else, I can't remember who it was, if it was on, I can't remember which sports show it was on, but they were talking about like, Zeke doesn't really have a lot of incentive to take the offer that's there because they're probably not going to lower it. They're probably like, if he holds out, they're probably not going to be like, well, we're not going to give you as much, they'll probably keep it where it is. But if they don't establish any kind of running game, the first couple of almost said episodes, the first couple of games, if they go 0-2 or 1-2 or something like that, and they're not, establishing much of an offense, then suddenly there's an incentive to get him back in there. So, it kind of makes sense for him to just wait and see what happens.
True. AJ, last words?
Yeah, it was kind of along the same lines pretty much. I have Melvin Gordon in one place that got auto drafted, I think, and I'm just like, okay, sure. But he scares me so much because unlike Ezekiel Elliott, I remember I was reading some articles and he is ready to miss games. Like he's ready to, if he doesn't get his contract, he's definitely ready to sit out. And I feel a lot more comfortable. Zeke just scares me too, because looking at Dallas's early schedule, like you were saying, Jared, if their running game just busts over the first few games, but they've got the Giants and the Redskins and the Dolphins, who I do not see as good run defenses. And
maybe the Giants.
Neither of them to me are just people that I'm confident in taking. Like I don't even know, maybe even David Johnson with his questionable offense is potentially quote unquote a safer pick than either Zeke or Gordon is, simply because he's actually going to play in the season.
That's true.
Yeah,
it is for a gambler. So I've seen a couple people. I've been in a couple drafts now where I've actually been in two back-to-back. Two drafts where a team took both Zeke and Melvin Gordon. Now they got them at really good prices, but. So what if, this person, whoever had to be thinking, what if they do come back week 2, week 3, so I lose my first 3 games. I've got Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott on my bench.
But that's a tough hole to dig out of. Yeah. Like I've been in, like they show you like the statistic. It's almost basically, it's kind of like the same as the NFL. Like if you drop to 0-2, your odds of making the playoffs go down to like 15% or something less than that, maybe. And it's kind of like the same thing with fantasy where you can go 0-2, but like if you go 0-3, then like it's very rare for teams to make playoffs. So I have definitely become more of a believer over the years in like checking out like what are players' schedules, and I will sometimes avoid guys that I might otherwise like because their early season schedule is really rough. And I think, okay, maybe if they get off to a slow start, I can trade for them cheap or something like that, So I'm really always leery of like getting in a hole because you just spend the rest of the season trying to dig out of it. So,
especially taking Gordon and Zeke, which basically are your first 2 picks. You could literally get anyone else.
No, most people are taking Gordon in the 6th.
I would take him in the 6th, but the leagues I've been in, he always still goes. I haven't seen him go in the 5th. I've always seen him go fourth, by the fourth.
Yeah.
And a lot of times even still third. And so the numbers like Zeke, I would have no problem. The leagues where I drafted him, one time I got him at the 7th pick, and one was an auction league where I paid like 54, 55, something like that for him. And so with
Zeke or Zeke. Yeah,
Zeke, yeah. And so 54 for him and then a couple of bucks for Pollard. So, I mean, like that's a pretty good value when Saquon's going for like 75, 76, 77.
I actually think though that go ahead. What?
No, I just to finish that off.
Yeah.
So I would do it for that, but somehow like it's been a weird thing in the leagues that I've been in. Like Zeke was actually going for less earlier on when I was drafting. Now he's going for like closer to 60, like 58, 59. And I'm just not
never pay for that.
willing to pay that, So it's been really weird. So I ended up just avoiding him for the most part.
Yeah.
I actually think at this point I'm feeling better about Melvin Gordon than I do Zeke. I think what I think it is it was that little Twitter interaction he had. I over the years watching, I've always had Melvin Gordon. I've watched him on and off the field. He cares about fans. He cares about what fans think. And he always interacts with the fans, and he has a relationship with the fans, whereas Zeke cares about money, and that's it. Money and fame. And I don't think he gives one iota about fantasy, about his fans, or anything. Not that Melvin Gordon is making decisions based off of that, but at least he's interacting and talking about it, and there's some kind of sway there, even if however small it is.
I think it's still just kind of risky because when you think about it, it's different when like Le'Veon held out because the Steelers didn't necessarily have a running back that they knew was going to be like actually good. And you look at Dallas, Pollard's been tearing it up in the preseason. He's been looking really good. And then if you look over at Los Angeles, they have Eckler, who's a great pass catching running back. And then you have Justin Jackson, who's a very good, not really a pass catching running back, but he's a good running back in general. And the two of them, I think, could work really well together. So then the question comes, do you take who you got and run with it? Or are you going to willing to cough at the big bucks? Because Zeke's close to a deal. Gordon's not close to a deal. Gordon scares me much more than Zeke does.
I think, but see, that's from the standpoint of the organization. I'm saying from the standpoint, from what I can tell, and maybe that's nothing. From what I can tell, though, and what I'm gleaning in the last few weeks is that I trust Gordon and his relationship with the team too, to come back and do the right thing much more than I do Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, but I mean, he would have to be like just really doing a hard bluff because I mean, I know the interaction you're talking about with like somebody took him in the 6th round and of a fantasy draft and he like replied to him or retweeted that or something. It's like, like, man, I'm offended or something like that. But, like I saw where he, a few days earlier he had, it probably wasn't like a full blown interview he had done, but just someone had gotten him for a comment and he said, I'm just waiting on the call from the Chargers. Yeah. And so, I mean, the Chargers are not calling you, they're, I mean, maybe if they get off to an 0-3 start, but I honestly don't think management would care. I mean, like, I just don't think the Chargers really care that much about winning. And so I think they would just let it still sit there because they just get locked in these, disputes we don't want to pay you. So
yeah, there's kind of like we don't negotiate with terrorists kind of feeling where they don't want to be bullied.
Well, that's the point you kind of brought up when you said that, that's what the organization feels, but the running back feels when it comes down to if the organization doesn't want to play you, they're not going to. But
they do want to play. I mean, in both cases, the organization
that much, though.
Do want to play him, though.
Dallas has showed they're willing to pay Zeke cash.
Yeah.
The Chargers have not showed that they're willing to pay him.
That could be, but I think in the end it comes down to the player deciding, and in both cases the player has to play. The player has to play this season
eventually.
Yeah, has to play. I think they have to play at least 6 games. So,
but it doesn't say how much they have to play.
Yeah, I think they have to play 6 games.
No, not like how much in the game they have to.
Oh, well, that is
Take
true.
them on special teams for 2 minutes, and there you go.
Well, but I think in both cases, the team's going to want to play him as much as possible. They're not going to like just bring him back and not play him. I mean,
Well, I think for Dallas that would be the case. I mean, I think like if Elliott came back, regardless of what point he came back in the season, he's still going to get 80% of the touches or whatever.
Yeah.
Melvin Gordon, it was already more of a split between him and Eckler than other teams. I'm not saying it was it wasn't a 50-50 split or anything like that, but if you have, Eckler and Justin Jackson that have been there all year, if they do relatively well.
Yeah, but they're not. You guys are overrating those guys way too much.
They played pretty well when Gordon missed time last year. They're not Melvin Gordon, but I'm saying again, like when you think about the Chargers organization, and just like what they might do, I mean they might just still like use it as more of a committee than before, because it already was like Eckler got a good number of touches before,
especially in the pass game too.
Yeah. So
we'll see.
We'll know a lot more about
Next
this
week.
time next week. Yeah, because Thursday night is Bears Packers, and then
right, which means we probably won't be filming that night.
Yeah.
I won't be.
Yeah.
So, do you guys mind doing it like Tuesday? Does that work Tuesday night?
As far as I know.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Tuesday night about 8 or 9? 8?
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
No, 9. I'd have to do it 9.
Okay. Yeah, 10 my time. That should be fine. Yeah, that should be fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that taken care of, we're going to have to say good night. Good night.
Good night.
We need some kind of outro. This is sad.
Well, I was thinking of one thing that we could say is if we were like thinking about it's taking